A huge section here in the course and a money section as far as your exam is concerned. Multi-layer switching and high availability protocols. A lot going on here. And we're going to hit multi-layer switching first. We've got a few minutes of nuts and bolts, and I promise it's just a few minutes, but they are important nuts and bolts. Then I've got 2 labs for you I know you're going to get a lot out of, and then we'll jump into the high availability protocols and services from there. Now, one of the first things that we hit you over the head and over the head and over the head with when it comes to your CCNA studies or any networking studies really, is that we got our switches over here, they run at layer 2, and here's all the stuff we do with switches. Then over here we got a router, the router runs at layer 3, and here's everything you can do at layer 3. Then you take your CCNA exam or your Network Plus exam, and it's just filled with questions, what's going on here at layer 2, can you do this at layer 3, identify the layer 3 services, that kind of thing. The key is, of course, layer 2 and layer 3 never meet. We've got a switch, we've got a router, 2 separate operations. Well, I'm going to unhit you right now because we're introducing you to layer 3 switches, which are also known as multi-layer switches. These devices switch and route packets in the switch hardware itself. They are fantastic. This was right up there with, as far as I'm concerned, with wireless networking when that was first developed. It's like, I don't have to have a cable everywhere I go. Well, this was fantastic as you were updating networks and introducing layer 3 switches to them, because these babies make it possible to have inter-VLAN communication, which we were trying to have earlier in another video but couldn't unless we got layer 3 involved. Well, this gets layer 3 involved on the same device, which is fantastic. It can because we don't have to bring in a separate router. We don't have to configure the dreaded router on a stick. And if you've never heard of that, I am not making that name up. If you want to see it in action, I've got, I can't say an old series of videos. It's a legacy series of videos out on YouTube. 2 or 3 part series, configuring them, troubleshooting them. I enjoyed it, but it really wasn't the most effective or efficient thing in the world. But these are layer 3 switches. Now, if 2 hosts and separate VLANs are connected to the same multi-layer switch, which I have a feeling we just might see in one of our labs, then the correct configuration, the correct one, will allow that communication without the data ever leaving the switch. It's fantastic. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of how that happens, and then we're going to do some of it. When it comes to the Cisco CAT switches, the hardware switching is performed by a router processor, or what we also call an L3 engine. And this processor must download routing information to the hardware itself. And to make that hardware-based packet processing happen, the switch is going to run one of 2 things. It's either going to run the legacy, old multi-layer switching, MLS, or the newer Cisco Express forwarding, CEF. In today's networks and today's switches, it is very likely it's going to be CEF. Now, we've got something called an ASIC here we need to take a look at, an application-specific integrated circuit. There's a mouthful. And it's going to perform the layer 2 rewriting operation of the packets. Okay, what's the rewriting operation? Well, we know from our previous studies, especially our NA studies, that the IP source and destination addresses of a packet don't change as the packet goes across the network. Remember those practice exams / job interview questions? You've probably seen them, when this packet gets here, what's the MAC address, what's the IP address, source and destination. Well, the IP source and destination addresses don't change, but the MAC addresses just might and probably do. And with multi-layer switching, it's the ASICs that actually perform that layer 2 overriding. Now, the CAM and TCAM tables. We know the CAM table. It's also known as the bridging table, also known as the MAC address table, alias the switching table. Well, we still have one in a multi-layer switch, and it looks just like a layer 2's CAM table, looks just like it. But, of course, with a layer 3 switch, we have a lot more going on. We've got routing going on, we got ACLs going on, we got quality of service, all kinds of other stuff. Well, a simple CAM table isn't going to be able to handle that. So we also have something called the TCAM table, ternary content addressable memory. Basically, the TCAM table stores everything the CAM table can't, including information regarding your ACLs and quality of service. Now, a couple of multi-layer switching methods I want to talk about here. The first one being route caching. Route caching devices have a routing processor and a switching engine. And the routing processor routes a flow's first packet. And then the switching engine snoops in on that packet and the destination, and then the switching engine takes over and forwards the rest of the packets in that flow. And there's the word flow again, and just another reminder of what exactly we mean by that. A flow is a unidirectional stream of packets from a given source to a given destination, point A to point B, and such packets get sent by a given protocol are part of a single flow. So if a source is sending both web traffic and TFTP packets to the same destination, we have two flows of traffic. And the MLS cache entries support such unidirectional flows. Now, route caching is effective, but there's that one little, I don't even call it a gotcha, it's a slight drawback that I mentioned. The first packet in any flow is going to be software switched. Now, all the other packets in the flow are going to be hardware switched, but it's much more effective to have it all done by hardware to begin with. And that's where CEF, Cisco Express Forwarding, comes in. Now, it's primarily designed for backbone switches. Now, it's a topology-based switching method that requires special hardware. So it's not available on all layer 3 switches, but today's modern switches, I see it on just about all of them. CEF is also highly scalable, which we love, and it's easier on your switch's CPU than route caching is. We also love that. We have two major components of CEF, the forwarding information base, the FIB, and the adjacency table, the AT. And a couple of name is the recipe deals here. The CEF-enabled devices are going to have the same routing information as a typical router, a pure router, if you will, but it's not found in a typical routing table. The FIB contains the usual routing information that you would think we need, destination networks, the mask, next hop IP addresses, that kind of thing. And CEF is going to use the FIB to make L3 prefix-based decisions. Now, the FIB's content will mirror that of the IP routing table, because frankly, that's what the FIB is. It is the IP routing table in another format. That's all it is. So the FIB takes care of us at layer 3, but what about layer 2? Well, that's where the adjacency table comes in. As adjacent hosts are discovered via ARP, that next hop L2 information is kept in the AT table for CEF switching. And a host is considered adjacent to another if they are just one hop apart. Probably hadn't heard hop since you studied RIP, if you ever did. So it's just one hop apart. Now, if these suckers get full, either the TCAM or the AT, there is a wildcard entry that redirects traffic to the routing engine. So we still get things done, just not as quickly as we might like. So just a quick reminder, summing it up, the FIB contains our layer 3 information. It's created via the IP routing table. The AT contains layer 2 information and is created via the ARP table. Now, at that point, the multi-layer switch is just about ready to forward the packet. Now, the switch is going to make the same changes to the packet that a router would, and that includes changing the L2 destination MAC address to that next hop MAC address, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. The layer 2 source address will change as well, and as we would expect, it changes to the MAC address on the switch interface that is actually transmitting the packet. So again, our layer 3 addresses don't change, but our layer 2 addresses do. Enabling CEF is easy. As a matter of fact, it's already done for you because CEF is on by default on any and all CEF switches, and actually it's built in so you can't turn it off. CEF, since it's hardware-based rather than software-based, it's not like we can go to the command line and say, oh, okay, you know, no CEF, da-da-da. There's no such command. There's no such thing. However, and there's always a however, this is networking, a multi-layer switch has to have IP routing enabled in order for CEF to run. Of course, it's going to have IP routing on, as we can see, as we will see in the labs, to do just about anything. So that's it for the nuts and bolts of our layer 3 switches. Now we're going to hit a couple of laps. We're going to create a switched virtual interface first, and then we will go ahead and configure a routed port. Just a quick note here, switched virtual interface, switch virtual interface, same thing. People drop the ED all the time. I can't imagine your exam doing that, but if it does, it does. If you want to go ahead, let's try that again. If you want to go ahead and jot this down for the next lab, go ahead and do so now. We're going to have two hosts connected to a multi-layer switch, And I will set that up right now, and I'll see you on the next video. We'll start that lab.